know Ahmed, Ahmed now is the founder and the CEO of Vyu Inc. Is that how you spell it?
Yes, Vyu, yeah.
But before, of course, Ahmed was very famous. He was part of the Maktoob Group. It was acquired by Yahoo, and he was the Vice President and Managing Director of Yahoo Middle East and North Africa for almost 4 years. Is that true? That's what your CV says.
That's what the CV says, yeah.
And apparently also he won. He was one of the 20 most powerful people in the media and marketing and the advertising industry in the Middle East. Wow, congratulations for that. Picked by Communicate magazine in 2009.
Yeah, I was very excited about that when I got it, and then I showed it to my wife, who's like, forget it. None of this makes any difference anyway, so she doesn't believe in any of it, so I think she's right. But.
And Ahmed now apparently lives in Los Angeles, when he goes home.
Yeah.
And do you still play tennis, or you still play that?
I do. I try to. Omar and I were just talking about having a tennis date soon. So.
But apart from all that, Ahmed's one of the nicest people I know, actually. So thank you, Ahmed, for coming all the way here to talk to us. And we want to talk about a few things. But you know, being of an Egyptian origin, and Egyptians always believe in the afterlife. So we're going to talk about the afterlife of Ahmed. Like, is there life after Maktoob, or that's it? And but before we go into that, we would like, I would like to ask you a few questions about your previous experience here. And what was the major difference you think that working under Maktoob with Samih and Hussam, and then moving to a big corporation like Yahoo? What struck you?
Yeah, there was a lot, right? I mean, it's a big change. First, thanks for having me here. Thanks, Amjad and Endeavor and Omar and everybody who's organized the event for having me. It's always really great to be back in Jordan, which is a second home for me since Amjad, as Amjad mentioned, I lived here for a good couple of years in the very early days of Maktoob before moving to Dubai. So yeah, it was definitely a big change. For once, I really, for one thing, I missed all the very long arguments that Samih and Hussam and I would have on a regular basis. Those I missed very much, and now I can go back to that now that they're backing this project of mine. So hopefully that's going to come back. But no, it was probably the most difficult part of my professional life when I went through that whole acquisition stage. Right, Maktoob was acquired back in 2009, right? So it's been many years now. But that 6-month period, especially around the due diligence period, and then once the acquisition was announced but wasn't completed and closed, and the transition to this whole other system, right? A process of going from a company that's just a couple of hundred people to a company that's 14,000 people, with a massive bureaucracy, right? Like on the Yahoo side, just the due diligence team on its own was over 100 people that we had to deal with, right? We were dealing with lawyers and financial people and internal and external teams. And Yahoo has, right, a whole team of just due diligence, acquisition specialists in every part of their operation, right? For product, for HR, for each of the services within a company. And so you start kind of dealing with that team, developing relationships with that team, and then the acquisition is complete and they're gone, right? Because they're off to another project, and then you're dealing with a whole new team. So I think the adjustment was very hard, I think, for us, because we already had challenges within Maktoob, right? We had a team in Dubai and a team in Amman. Those were our two primary locations. We had small offices elsewhere in the region. But already the two offices had, we've always struggled with the two different cultures in terms of company culture within, from between Dubai and Amman. And on top of all that, then we suddenly had people coming in from the Bangalore office of Yahoo and Sunnyvale and all over the world, right? And these guys, especially in the Jordan office, I think it was a major step for them, right? I mean, they had enough problems when the guys from Dubai came, right? And they had a hard enough time dealing with their attitude, let alone, someone coming in from other parts of the world, right? So a lot of challenges.
Do you think this massive organization
would
kill the talent? Like, was Maktoob more agile
I mean, no question. No question. I mean, you have really two different sides of it, right? One is you lose. It's much harder to be entrepreneurial within a major organization like that. Within Yahoo, we were still very much kind of a new, we were the new business. We were the new kids on the block. So in the beginning, we had a lot of leeway, especially that first year to 2 years of the acquisition. They gave us a lot of leeway, and the organization was ready to, they understood kind of that this is an emerging market. It's a new market that they need to invest in, and the structure supported that, and the leadership in the company supported it, right? From the CEO down to the level of the whole C-level staff of the company in Sunnyvale, they understood what this was about. They paid a lot of money for this company. They needed to invest more to grow the business, and this is not a revenue volume business in the short term, but it's an investment to lead, right? As soon as that leadership changed in Yahoo, that's when things really changed, right? So it was easy in the beginning because we had a lot of that leeway, but once that the leadership at the top changed, then you had a whole group of people that weren't involved in this acquisition, right? They had no stake in the fact that Yahoo paid $164 million for Maktoob, right? They didn't have any stake in it. So for them, it was not their deal, that was somebody else's deal, and there wasn't much of an interest in international to start with, so that made it even harder, right? So that's kind of the struggle what you see even today, right? I mean, they just closed their office in Amman, unfortunately. They closed in Cairo, but that's just a reflection of what's going on internationally for the company.
I was about to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I mean, like yesterday when they were talking about, giving your baby away to somebody else, and now basically what you did, you gave the baby to somebody that killed him.
Yeah, no, it's very difficult, right? It's very, I mean, this is the challenge. I mean, but it's true, but that wasn't the case. Again, those first couple of years, situation was very different, right? You had, this deal was something that we had worked on for a good, over a year and a half, right? Of very, difficult negotiations and discussions. But it was clear to us that there was a vision from the Yahoo side that was going to take Maktoob to another level, right? This was a deal that was sponsored by the Senior Vice President of Emerging Markets for Yahoo. It involved directly the CEO of the company. Jerry Yang was involved directly, right? These are all guys we met with. And so there was a commitment at that level, to really grow and to take Maktoob and the Middle East and Africa markets to another level for the company, right? The problem is we could never forecast that 2 years down the road, Jerry Yang was going to be out of the board, Carol Bartz was going to be fired. There would be no more emerging markets organization within Yahoo. That no longer exists, right? They blew that whole thing up. So
what happened
that's,
to you, Ahmed? You start going to work from 9 to 5
and this is kind of what progressively happened is I started really finding myself.
Professional emailer.
I mean, this is the problem. I mean, what ended up happening is there's a bureaucratic environment, right? I spent my first 3 years fighting for a lot of things, especially after the change happened. It was about fighting for whatever we can keep in our region, fighting for the teams here, for growth, for investment. So you don't know how many investment cases we made. I mean, I found myself really in my 4th year, never even in the region, right? I mean, my whole time was somewhere in California, in Europe, basically fighting the fight for the region in terms of the business side of it. And it wasn't getting anywhere, right? Because in the end, international was not a priority. So it became frustrating, right? And so kind of the choice is, do you become like the 9 to 5 emailer, as you said? And that's how a lot of these companies are, right? That's the reality as you get bigger. You have kind of the fiefdoms, right? You have, Yahoo I was a vice president at Yahoo, but there were 199 other vice presidents in Yahoo, right? So each one had their own kind of fiefdom within the company that most of them tried their very best to protect, right? They had an interest to keep that. So it's no longer about what's good necessarily for the company. It's about what do I do to protect that fiefdom. And it's very easy to slip into that space, and I think it's a lesson for businesses that grow. It's just a normal part of the process, is how do you keep an entrepreneurial spirit within the company, but at the same time keep and develop processes that work. It's not easy, right? And obviously you see it with Yahoo today and with others, that it's very difficult to change management within an organization like that when you have to deal with senior people who are really stopping change. It's very, very hard to do.
Okay, so now that's about the past.
Yes,
now,
yeah.
To the future, what did you take to your pyramid with you? Now you're talking about this new product called Vyu. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, one very quick thing about the good part about Yahoo, because there's a lot of good things, right? I mean, I don't want to leave the impression that it's a negative experience. It's not at all. One thing you learn is process, right? And you learn really how to kind of work within a matrix environment, right? In Maktoob, it was all about like, coming to an agreement with Samih and Hussam and making a decision and just rolling with it. It was mainly that, right? In Yahoo, you never do that, right? And you have to always kind of get buy-in from multiple parts of the organization. So that is very helpful in managing any size business, right? How do you really involve your team and get them to really buy into what you're doing? Because that's the only way you can get things done, right? So that's kind of, I think, hopefully is something that I can take with me. But definitely, I was anxious to completely, I had a really good experience, but I wanted to go back to kind of my roots, which is really being in a early stage startup kind of experience, getting something from scratch. Somehow that's been, my life has always found me, like I always found myself kind of in that kind of situation where, whether it's in the US or with the Maktoob experience, really getting into something at the beginning, and I missed that. So I had looked at a bunch of different ideas, and one of them that seemed really to make sense for our region, I mean, I started off with the Middle East region and what's missing, right, was this concept of, you had a lot of, you had three dynamics going on that were very strong. One is TV viewing. The other is mobile, and the other is social. I remember I had a meeting with one of the senior NBC executives when I was at Maktoob, and I was trying to convince him about online and digital and all that stuff, and he's like, look, no matter what, forget about online. Online's not gonna, it's not a big deal. But in this part of the world, people just have two things. That's all they care. It doesn't matter how much money they have. All they have is TV. Everybody has a TV and a mobile phone, right? So even from that traditional approach, right, it's not something necessarily I agree with, but like even if you take it that way, it's true. TV continues to be a very strong force for consumers in this part of the world and everywhere else. The platform, the delivery method might be different, might be changing, but TV is very strong and video is very strong. Mobile obviously is something that is massive in our region and worldwide. And the social engagement levels in this part of the world are higher than most places. It's much higher than it is in the US, it's much higher than it is in Europe, right?
What do you mean by that exactly?
In terms of when people engage with Facebook, with Twitter, with other social platforms, people spend a lot more time on these services. They consume it, they engage with it at a much higher level than in the so-called mature markets. A Facebook user in the US doesn't use Facebook, isn't engaged in Facebook as much as a user in Egypt or Saudi Arabia or in Turkey. Those countries are much higher in terms of in terms of the engagement on these services once you have a user.
Is that because we're like فاضيين شغل ولا you have access to smartphones?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something there, Amjad. But I think there's a yearning to share information, I mean, it's a very good question because it's actually something that I thought about too, and it's interesting. Like in a place like the U.S., it's meeting people is probably not a difficult thing to do, right? People go out, they spend time, and they'll go to a bar after work. They'll there are a lot of different places to kind of meet in real life. Whereas I think maybe and this is especially true probably in some Gulf countries in this part of the world, it's more difficult to engage, right? And you know, social restrictions, cultural traditions, and so on. I think this is where social becomes really interesting, I think, for our part of the world. But it's the same also when you see it in other developing markets, right? So social in general, you know, Turkey has a lot higher social engagement than Western Europe, or you know, so it's the same in India as these discoveries kind of take place. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, when you take these three dynamics together, I started thinking about like how do we kind of take advantage of these three really high growth elements that are happening in developing markets, because these three dynamics of TV, social, and mobile, the pattern is the same really in all emerging markets. And when you look at it, even in mature markets, also it hasn't been kind of figured out. So I looked at some of the social TV concepts that are out there. Yahoo had actually bought a company called Into Now several years ago, and everybody here was very excited about that. And I tried my best to bring it to the Middle East, and Yahoo wasn't interested in doing that. But looking at these services, I saw really like there is a need for something that makes the process of discovery and sharing a lot simpler. You take, for example, right before this thing, you know, before this event started, Amjad and I were talking about, he mentioned to me he's following this TV show called The Americans, right? And I'm like, wow, okay, it's funny that you mentioned that's one of my favorite shows, and we started talking about that. How many times do you get into conversations with friends about TV, right? A lot of people probably get into those conversations during the day. What did you think about the show last night? Have you seen Homeland? Have you watched Arab's Got Talent? What do you think about this contestant? Those are the types of things that happen, you know, everybody gets into these discussions. And once you like a show, you get obsessed with a show. You get into this like, when is the next show on? When is the next episode? Are they going to do another season of this show? What did this actor do? And what are the stories and the gossip? And people get very involved, right? And if you go into Twitter and some of the, right, I mean, you'll see like the level of addiction towards a show that people have. The challenge is this information about shows, for American shows, it's there, right? You have a lot of information, but it's widely distributed. It's highly fragmented. It's not, you can't go to just one place and get everything, right? I can get a little bit at IMDb. I'll go into Google and search for the latest gossip about a particular actor. If I'm looking for the social conversation around a show, I need to do also a lot of work, right? How many people even know how to get, how to do searches on Twitter via hashtags, right? Everybody in this room probably does, but not a lot of people, even in the US, really kind of completely get it, right? And even if they do, it takes time. I'm going to search for a show. I'm going to do a hashtag search for an actor and the characters and so on, right? It takes me a long time. And at the same time, if I'm watching a show, I'm sitting around with this mobile device, and I'm doing a lot of this kind of searching, but it wastes a lot of my time. And what we're trying to do with Vyu is to simplify that experience of discovery. Having, you know, if I'm following a show, I pick it, I immediately get all that information in one place around the program. I get access to the whole social conversation. It's ready for me. I don't need to do anything to find it. And then I could easily share that with my friends on Facebook and Twitter, and easily interact and give my opinion and share interesting videos and so on. So that's the concept around it.
Actually, I was surprised to hear from you that you were going to launch it in the US and in the Middle East together. I mean, don't you think that's a little bit of a challenge?
Yeah. Yeah, from an audience, probably yes. The content side, sadly, it's much easier to launch in the US than it is here, right? And this goes into kind of some of the challenges that businesses here, you know, in the digital space have. It's much harder to deal with content in our part of the world than it is in the US, right? Like, if you want information about TV shows and actors, we were talking about this before, you have a ton of open source sources in English, you know, in the US. It's easy to get. you don't even have to pay any money for it, right? The challenge is how do you actually put it together in a format that makes sense, that's user-friendly, and so on. Here, it's much harder to get the content. Some of it is not available at all. When it's available, it's, you run into all these, a lot of copyright issues. The model itself for content isn't developed, so even people who own the copyright, there isn't an easy, accepted syndication model or content licensing model in our region, so you can't really get to it. And when it's there, the quality is not consistent. So the difficulty is actually launching it in this market rather than in the US market from just a content standpoint.
Why bother the Middle East?
Yeah, because one is I do have a lot of hope for the potential in this market, right? There is a reality of consumers are here, they're using their mobile phones, they want content, there's a hunger for something of quality, for something that really meets their expectations, right? Most Arab users today still, when they go on their mobile phone, what services do they use? They use still Facebook and Twitter and Google and all the international services, right? And some of them use Jiran, right? But reality is, right, there aren't a lot of local services that have done well on mobile today, right? You talk to Apple, you talk to Samsung and the Google guys, right? They're struggling with applications that deal with local content. I spoke with a guy who heads up the Apple business for emerging markets, right? And he tells me that most of the applications that they get that are produced here, Apple doesn't even approve, right? Because they don't meet the basic guidelines for Apple apps, so they can't even put them in their store. And he's desperate for local applications around content, because he's fighting the fight of, he wants people to move from the US store to the UAE store, right? And the local stores. But nobody's doing that still because, there's just nothing of value, or that's saying a lot, right? It's not that bad. But the value people get is a lot higher when they use the US store today. We have a kind of a crisis of the quality, of trust from between the user and the product that we're making here. And I think if we crack that, if we're able to deal with that, then the opportunity is massive, because we saw it already on the website. We saw the potential of what can happen. I think it can be the same way on mobile. You had a question back there?
So I'm guessing you're targeting women between 18 and 45 that are consuming these TV shows. Is one of the options in terms of monetization giving them the opportunity to buy Carrie's dress?
For sure, yeah. That's when it comes to, that's a great question. That's right. Yes.
What is the beef in this?
The main thing is that there is a consumer need for it, right? And this is one of those very interesting differences too between our region and if we take the US as an example, right? When you meet with an investor in the US, it's very, I haven't run into it very often where the question of how are you going to make money comes in, right? It's really the biggest question is about the team itself, who's involved in this, and the market, right? The consumer. So those are is there a need for this product? What's the problem you're solving, right? And I think I'm a commercial guy. My whole life I've been a marketing guy. So
you are solving a problem if you get people to be able to buy
Carrie's dress. Yes. Yes. So I think there is, if we want to jump over the consumer need, the monetization side is exactly right. You have an opportunity on the e-commerce side to look at people wanting to buy that dress, right? So that's one side of it. There's a basic advertising component. Obviously, there is because obviously there's a lot of money going into TV, and there's an understanding by these advertisers that a lot of the viewer's attention is going away to the mobile device at the same time that they're watching something. So they want to be on that device too. There's also a data component that's really important. And that's especially relevant for us here, because there's very little good data available around TV viewing, right? And everybody will tell you that. Everybody in the advertising industry knows the elephant in the room, that nobody really, trusts any of the information that's out there. So if you have data about what people are watching, the demographics of who's watching what they like, the social listening aspect of it, and what they're saying about a show and an episode and the actors, that's also very valuable to both the advertisers and the media owners themselves in their program planning.
Ahmed, it was really good to hear your story around Yahoo and Maktoob and growth. And what's really nice to hear is that Sami and Sam are investing in your new venture, which means that you've obviously, still feel very positive about the relationship you had and the working experience. If you could go back and do it again, is there anything you'd say, you know what, I would do that one thing differently?
To do again in terms of with Yahoo and Maktoob? Well, that's a really good question. What I would do differently? I'm trying to think here. I think we did, in the acquisition stage, we did a really good job in that stage as Maktoob. On the Maktoob side, we did everything we could. I think we, as a team, between Sami, Sam, myself, the whole team here in Amman, and I think we did a really good job of presenting and obviously it paid off in the deal, right? In the back of my mind, when we were going through all this, I was always thinking, if I were Yahoo, would I buy Maktoob, right? And this is always an interesting thing to think about, right? A lot of us, we're here, we're in this market, we know this market. We're like, okay, but we can do it ourselves, right? It'll cost us very little to build something. But I think within that context, I think we did everything we can to make it happen. I think it's probably in the beginning, I was in this new big company, and I thought I put a lot of trust in the Yahoo guys that I was dealing with, that they knew what they were doing, right? So we would meet a product person, we would meet an engineering, senior engineering guy, whatever. And I think we put a little bit too much trust that we didn't know enough. Maybe that's one thing I would do differently, is that we should have had maybe a bit more confidence. Like that would have saved us a lot of time, probably, a lot of months of wasted time doing things because we thought, well, of course Yahoo must know how to do this better than we do. But the reality is, especially when it comes to Arabic and programming in Arabic, we found that Yahoo knew very little about how to even deal with right-to-left languages. I would have been probably a lot more forceful in how we shape the structure of our engineering team, because I think one of the biggest mistakes that happened after the acquisition is that the engineering team in Amman was sucked into being part of this emerging markets engineering team that's based in India, rather than actually be part of developing the Yahoo products for Arabic, the main products. So we didn't have any say over like making Yahoo Mail in Arabic, Yahoo homepage, Yahoo News, and so on. These guys couldn't work on the main products that we really wanted to bring in Arabic, right? And so that, I think, became a really, that was an opportunity lost, because it took us a year to get a homepage in Arabic, because the guys in Sunnyvale couldn't program a page in Arabic, right? Whereas our guys in Amman could have done that in a week, I have one quick story, I know we're out of time, but I'm always very proud of this story and the team here in Amman, because in one of the first meetings we had with Yahoo, our engineers, they were really excited to show the Yahoo guys. We had this big meeting with all the engineering senior VPs, and it was very quick. They put together a hacked version of Yahoo Messenger, completely in Arabic. Completely right to left, everything working in Arabic. And they showed it to the Yahoo team. And instead of that group being really excited and like, wow, we just paid good money for this company for good reason. These guys know what they're doing. They got scared. They got completely scared. They were like, shit, my God, this is, sorry, but this is like unbelievable. You know, how can you do this? How did you get the code? Where did you get this? You know, and I learned like Yahoo has actually a whole team called the Paranoids, right? I thought it was a joke, but it's a real thing, the Paranoids, right? The security people, and I learned that's a whole like industry. But that's something that should have been a good sign for us, right? We never got Yahoo Messenger in Arabic. That never launched, okay? It never happened. And that team was never utilized the way they should have been, because Yahoo could have had all of these products really within months, rather than not having any of them, or sometimes waiting, you know, a year plus to get these things out. And that's lost users, lost revenue for the company, right? So that's probably one of the big things I would do differently, is push harder for that team to move. But we kind of put trust that these guys just paid all this money, they must know what they're doing, right? And that was probably not a good thing.
All right. Well, thank you, Ahmed, for coming all the way from LA and coming here this morning.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure everyone enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.